Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this evening's Policy and Oversight Board. This evening, we've got one topic on the agenda, which is the budget. We will have a look at the corporate budget in more detail, but we will also have an overview of the situation with the budget for the Council. Before we get on to that, I would like to say that this meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel, and by participating in the meeting, you are agreeing to being recorded. Could I just say to officers, could you please introduce yourselves to the committee when you first address the committee so we know who's talking to us? Just a matter of housekeeping, if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the meeting in an orderly fashion by the staff fire exit, which is behind me to the right. Officers will direct you to the assembly point in Riverside Gardens should that happen. So with no further ado, I will go on to the agenda and firstly ask for any apologies for absence. Don't believe we've got any apologies for absence. However, notably, there are transport problems in this neck of the woods this evening, and both Councillor Salus and Councillor Perez are likely to be late due to that, but we are quorate, so we will carry on with the meeting. Second item, are there any declarations of interest that anybody needs to declare in relation to any items on the agenda this evening? No. Okay, thank you. So the third item is minutes of the previous meeting. Does anybody want to raise any matters of accuracy out of the previous minutes? Those minutes agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And I believe that an actions sheet has been attached to the minutes. So if anybody wants to raise anything at that, they think anything's missing, then please let us know, and we will make sure that a response is sent. So with no other issues arising from that, I will move straight on to the revenue budget and medium-term financial strategy. So I believe we will have a presentation on the overall budget firstly. We'll pause very briefly for any questions, but I believe that this will be the same presentation that will be going or has been to all of the other policy and accountability committees. So hopefully the chairs will be familiar with this and have opportunities to ask questions in relation to their particular budget areas. But I will pause briefly for questions afterwards, and then we'll move on to the more detailed corporate budget. So over to Councillor Ree, our Cabinet Member for Finance.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to the whole committee for asking me to come here this evening to talk through the budget. I'm going to give a brief overview. I'm conscious that most of you have already heard this presentation at the individual PAC meetings, so I'll try and rattle through it. And having done this presentation now 7 times in the last 2 weeks, even I'm getting sick of the sound of my own voice, which I didn't think I'd ever get to that position. But I wanted to start by saying a few thanks. Firstly, thank you very much to all of my cabinet colleagues who've worked with me to put this budget together. This isn't something that one person or one department does on its own. This is a budget made by the whole council, and the work of all of the cabinet members and officers throughout the departments has been vital in making sure that we've been able to put together a balanced budget. I'd also like to thank the finance officers in particular who've worked so hard to make sure that the numbers all add up. We've got Andre, Alex, James, and I'm not sure who this is on the end. I've never met him before. No, Sukhvinder, who's done a wonderful job of getting the budget together and making sure that the figures all add up. Putting together a balanced budget at the moment is no mean feat, so they've all worked incredibly hard, and I want to give them my thanks for that. Overall, we've got a budget of £221 million. I said that this is a difficult time to be putting a budget together, and it would be remiss of me if I didn't say that since 2010, the revenue funding from central government has been cut from 164 million to 132 million in cash terms. That's a 54% cut in real terms. But also we have changing demographics in the area. We have the fact that we've had at best sluggish, at worst crisis-ridden economy for the last 15 years. means that there's been increased demand on council services and increased calls for council support. So we're seeing a real squeeze on council resources. Some good news, though, is that in the budget in October, there were a number of new spending items announced for local government that we've been able to get our slice of here in Hammersmith and Fulham. A couple of notable ones to pick out: the Household Support Fund. This was something that was cancelled by the previous government, extended again by the new government. That gives us £1.8 million here in Hammersmith and Fulham that we can spend on providing support for the most vulnerable residents in the borough. The Extended Producer Responsibility, that's a £1.1 billion programme nationally. It makes sure that companies that produce lots of waste, such as packaging, pay some of the cost of clearing all of that up. And so we've been able to use some of that here in Hammersmith and Fulham. Finally, something I wanted to point out was the homeless prevention grants, £233 million overall. Homeless prevention is a huge issue for local councils. There are obligations placed on councils that we have to meet, and the number of people coming to councils presenting as homeless has been going up and up in recent years. Overall, London councils spend £4 million a day on preventing homelessness, so this really is an area where budgets are being squeezed. So when we're putting together a budget, these are some of the priorities that we look to ensure it includes. Firstly, and I think the priority of all areas of government, is keeping residents safe, making sure that the public is protected. And I'll come on to that briefly, how we've managed to do that in this year's budget. We want to protect the statutory services that we provide here in Hammersmith and Fulham, but also those extra services that we provide that make Hammersmith and Fulham so unique. Things like free home care, things like free breakfast for primary school children, things like the law enforcement team, and things like our comprehensive council tax support scheme. Within the council, we want to make sure that we are running as efficiently as possible, that we're taking advantage of the latest developments so that we can run effective and efficient services, and that those services are overseen properly, and that we have adequate reserves in order to look out for a rainy day. Finally, last but certainly not least, preserving the low status of council tax here in Hammersmith and Fulham. We're very proud of our record when it comes to council tax. In the last 10 years, we've cut or frozen council tax 5 times. But it's not just about how much people pay in council tax, but who pays that's important. And that's why our council tax support scheme supports 4 in 10 households, providing a discount for the most vulnerable residents. We've taken care leavers, we've taken foster carers out of council tax completely. That's something that this administration has chosen to do, and we're one of just 3 local authorities in London that's maintained a 100% support for the most vulnerable residents. So if you move to the headlines of this budget, what it is that we're doing: this is a budget to fund the fight against crime and antisocial behaviour here in Hammersmith and Fulham, both tackling crime and the causes of crime. We're investing in our law enforcement team and the innovative gangs unit that keeps young people out of a life of crime. And we're putting new resources into preventing violence against women and girls, building on the PSPO that we introduced last year, preventing street harassment within the whole borough. In terms of preventing crime, we're also investing in our school attendance strategy, and through the digital inclusion strategy that this committee has considered in recent months, we will be making sure that residents are aware of the fastest growing crime in the country, fraud. We're also investing in the key services that people in Hammersmith and Fulham rely on so much, relieving the pressure that I mentioned earlier from demographic change and from increased demand. We're investing new money into the adult social care service and the children's service. We're putting new money into homeless prevention, and we're investing in our quality weekly waste collection. Finally, we are investing to make sure that the borough is more prosperous, more pleasant, and more enjoyable to live in through investment in Upstream, the industrial strategy that the council is so proud of. Already, that's generated over £6 billion of investment in the area and 13,200 jobs. Obviously, the more prosperous we can make the area, the better our business rate returns are in future years, and so that will help us protect services in the future. We're investing in the climate change team, perhaps the biggest issue facing not just our borough, but our country and our planet. And we're trying to make our sports facilities as enjoyable as possible by putting new investment into their maintenance. This next slide goes over some of the key figures in the budget. You'll see there £12.3 million of new investment. That's new money going towards services here in Hammersmith and Fulham, and over £5 million, £5.1 million of efficiencies that we've found within the budget over the course of the year. You'll see also I mentioned the increase in government grants at the start with that figure of £7.8 million that has it provides some respite from the large cuts we've had in recent years, but it is funding some vital work here in the borough. Next, we have some details of where that investment is going. So £3.4 million in in fighting crime and antisocial behaviour. That's the LET team, the gangs unit, and the prevention of violence against women and girls. We've got £2.8 million going into adult services, £2.2 million going into children's services, £1.8 million in our waste service, £1.2 million going into homeless prevention. And then in terms of savings, this sets out where we've found those £5.1 million of efficiencies within the budget. Just to give a vague flavour of these, most of these savings come from tackling issues early on before they spiral into becoming bigger problems that cost more money to solve. But there are details of some of the key saving proposals affecting this department in the papers. When it comes to council tax, as I say, we're rightly very proud of our position in council tax. I genuinely think there's nowhere better in the country to be a council taxpayer than right here in Hammersmith and Fulham. Third lowest council tax in the country, and we've kept that by cutting or freezing council tax 5 times in the last 10 years. I mentioned our council tax support scheme. We've got some figures there of who benefits from it. As we voted at the last full council meeting, we've maintained that going forward for another year. That's something that we're very keen to preserve, and as long as we have a Labour administration here in the borough, we will do. The next slide provides just an overview of how the money is allocated across departments. That's growth spending, inflation spending for pay and contracts, and then where the savings have been found. Then we come to reserves. I mentioned when I was talking about the priorities when setting the budget, making sure that we've got a resilient budget and we've got money put aside for a rainy day is very important. This separates out the 2 different types of reserves that we have. Firstly, the general balances. These are your sort of rainy day funds. For the last 2 years, we've run a budget surplus, and so we've been able to add to these funds. So at a time when most councils are taking money out just to balance their budgets. We then have the earmarked reserves. Now, the purpose of these is really to smooth large items of spending over a number of years. So if, for instance, we know that we're going to need to invest £1 million in IT equipment in 4 years' time, rather than waiting for 4 years and then trying to find £1 million in the budget, we can put £250,000 aside for 4 years, and then we know that we have the money there when we need it. That goes up and down over the next few years, depending on which projects we know we're going to need to invest in. And this is a budget is for life, not just for February. We are always working over numerous years. So this MTFS strategy sets out how it is we're going to be finding efficiencies in the future and finding additional revenue. So first and foremost, boosting economic growth in the borough through upstream. There's new funding for upstream in this budget. And so that will generate additional business investment and future business rates revenue. In terms of how we operate as a council, we've got a number of transformation programs, making sure that the council works as efficiently as possible. And we're taking advantage of the newest technology as well to make sure that we're operating as effectively as we can, and that services are delivered in the best possible way for residents. We've got a very good record when it comes to generating community infrastructure levy and Section 106 funds. Last year, we managed to raise £22 million from Section 106 and SIL. That's a record for this borough. The year before, it was £19 million, which was the previous record for this borough. Because of the approach that we've taken to negotiating with property developers, we've been able to make sure that the community benefits from developments as well as the individual developers themselves. In terms of securing resources through national programmes, there are lots of pots of money out there, particularly for things like sustainable finance and greening the borough. We want to make sure that we're getting as much of that as possible. So we're making sure that when it comes to bid writing and bid targeting, we're in the best possible place. And finally, I talk about as being ruthlessly financially efficient. That's because, every day finance officers and cabinet members are going through their budgets line by line, working out making sure that every penny is spent in the best possible way for residents and is being used as efficiently as possible. So far, we've found, it says 133 million there, but we've got the extra 5.1 million pounds of efficiencies as well. So nearly 140 million pounds of efficiencies over the course of this administration. Then finally, in terms of next steps and the timeline for the budget, I mentioned I'd spent the last few weeks going to all of the individual PAC meetings, so thank you very much for having me at your committees. I've saved the best till last. This is obviously my favourite committee, so I'm glad that I could come here at the end. Then next Monday, we'll be taking the budget to Cabinet, and then it'll be presented at Budget Council on the 26th of February, when the Council will get a chance to vote on it. So thank you very much for your time. I think the officers are going to talk through the impact of the budget on the corporate services function, but I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Mr. Colsey, is there anything you wanted to add to that at this stage, or?
Not at all. The Cabinet member has covered everything fully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Brocklebank-Fowler.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask Councillor Ree, you're moving the funding for the LET and the gangs team and so on to the general fund from Section 106 and SIL. Why are you doing this?
Thank you very much. So having funding in the base budget means that it's always there. We don't need to go out and find the funding every year in the way that you do with Section 106 Community Infrastructure Levy funding. This really secures the future of the LET team and makes sure that they're going to be there for many years to come. There might be a day when this administration isn't running the borough, perhaps sometime long in the future. And considering the previous administration's record on generating Section 106 money, I'm not confident that they'd be able to maintain that funding. So moving it into the base budget protects it for future years.
With the greatest of respects, I think that's unlikely. That there wouldn't be the money available, given the amount of Section 106 that we generated in our 8 years in administration. I can understand you wanting to safeguard your own political position because it's looking increasingly weak. But not you personally, I mean Labour, the Labour group. But the point is, within the general fund, you are doing a one-off funding, are you, from Section 106. I mean, where is the extra money coming from in the general fund for this? Or what are you not doing?
Okay, so just to take issue with a couple of things you said, I don't think we are in a particularly weak position when it comes to generating Section 106 money. Last year we had a record amount. The year before we also had a record amount. This administration has a particularly good record when it comes to this. So I don't quite understand where you're coming from there. If we could go to slide 6. So this gives, this shows all the figures. We've got, as I say, £12.3 million of new investment as part of this budget. The £3.4 million for the LET and the gangs unit is part of that. Okay, I think we're just getting it up on the screen.
While we're looking for that slide,
Yeah,
have you
I
got
mean,
any other,
well,
questions?
yes. The point is that 3.6 million is now being paid out, 3.4 is now being paid out of the general fund. Yes. Well, where would you have spent that 3.4 if you had been funding the LET from section 106 and SIL?
So how would we have spent the £3.4 million if we weren't spending it on the LET team?
Yes.
Well, we wouldn't have been spending it.
You would have been keeping it in the general fund.
Yeah, I mean, we either we wouldn't, council tax wouldn't have changed, or we might have spent money in a different area. But this is a priority for us, and so it's something we wanted to invest in.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's clear. Okay,
I would just come in, I think, on as we're talking about the Let's team, and it's really just a comment, which was an observation, I think, Councillor Vaughan and I the other evening. One of the reasons that we actually kind of went down the road of funding the Let teams was obviously because we had concerns about the fact that the police were not being as responsive. And I think it was due to the change in the command structure where we went in with Westminster and Kensington and Chelsea. And Councillor Vaughan and I learned the other evening, which completely justifies, I think, what we did and how we've invested in the Let's team, that I think just our one ward, Conningham, had 49 abstractions where the officers from Conningham ward were taken out of duty in Conningham to be taken to a big protest or something like that in central London. So if that's just happened in Conningham alone, if we repeat that across everybody's wards here, it does actually, give us good reason for doing what we did with the Let's team. I don't know if you've got any observations about that, Councillor Ree.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's completely right. I think the feedback we get from residents is that this is a hugely popular programme. The fact that they're visible, they're approachable, and that they're able to directly solve issues that residents are having, rather than having to go through the whole Met bureaucracy, means that they've been incredibly effective. Last night I was lucky enough to be at the Social Inclusion and Community Safety Committee, chaired by Councillor Souslis, and we heard a report from the LET team and all the excellent work that they're doing. It really is making a huge difference within the borough, and the feedback that they're getting is incredibly positive.
Councillor Vaughan.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ray, thank you very much for bringing this tonight. Thank you again to you and all of the officers for the hard work that you've been putting in, both to present this balanced budget tonight and also throughout the year. Clearly, as you said, there are a lot of pressures on the budget, not least the sort of real terms cut in funding that's happened over the past 14 years, or slightly more than that now. So clearly it's an enormous work that takes place sort of 12 months of the year, not just the few months in the lead up to the budget. So thank you for all the work you've done on that. I think two things. On this 3.4 million for the Let team, I presume that the sort of reciprocal of that is that there's 3.4 million more in the Section 106 and SIL budget that can be spent on other priorities for the community this year and potentially in subsequent years as well. So that will obviously go on other priorities, but is there for spending on residents' priorities across the borough, but there's 3.4 million extra effectively there rather than that being part of the base budget. Also, just to point out, I'm not sure you quite mentioned this, but of course the fact that we've kept free home care for the past 10 years is also something that's baked into this budget. Clearly there continue to be extra spending that we've done on that over the course of time. So certainly commend you and the officers for ensuring that we've got the funding to continue with that important work as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely right on both points. So I think I definitely recommend having a look at the report that we put out on SIL and Section 106 funding. There's some really interesting stuff in there. You know, £22 million is being put towards some really good projects across the whole of the borough, whether that's place shaping, creating additional affordable housing, improving our parks. There's really something for everyone and across the whole of the borough as well. It's a really invaluable source of funds, and it's doing some excellent work. So yeah, you're absolutely right to mention that that means there's additional funding there for other works. And yes, you're absolutely right again to say we're maintaining the free home care policy. I read a very interesting article in The Observer a couple of weeks ago, which was looking at the way that we provide free home care here in Hammersmith and Fulham. And I hope it's something that Baroness Casey is going to look at as part of her review into how social care is provided in this country. I think we've got a pretty good model here in Hammersmith and Fulham. I think there's a lot that we could be teaching the wider world.
Councillor Trahey?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to jump in on that point about the LET team, because there was the National Audit Office last week had a report that over the last 14 years, the violence against women and girls, since 2010, when the Conservative Party began its 14 years, there've been three separate there's been three separate whole system responses to the rising incidents of rape and sexual assault that have absolutely failed. And in fact, sexual assault is estimated to be 4.3% in 2023-4, up from 3.4 in 2009-10. Now, the presence of the LET team on our streets can't be denied as having a positive effect on violence against women and girls and the safety of women and girls in our borough. I think you also mentioned that another stream of that we were bringing in the catcalling. So if you could tell us a little bit more about that as well, that would be great.
Absolutely, thank you very much. Yeah, that's a very good point. So the additional £250,000 that we're spending on preventing violence against women and girls is going to provide some hugely valuable support. We're funding things like specialist courts for this, because we know that the prosecution levels for violence against women and girls is woeful at the moment, right? And so any additional support we can provide to keep women and girls in the borough safer, we're very keen to do. I read a very well-written article on the My London website about the first fine that we'd seen from this PSPO, the Public Space Protection Order. So we were the first borough in the country to introduce a borough-wide ban on street harassment through this. And I definitely recommend reading it. There was a good article about the lady who'd made the complaint and how the council was able to follow that up and to find the individual concerned. So it's already making a difference. Hopefully it's going to make a big difference for a lot of women across our borough.
Thank you.
Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Ree and officers, for bringing this budget. It's really impressive to see a balanced budget with so much investment, particularly given the environment where not all London boroughs are managing to come with anything like this kind of solid budget and solid investment. I'd like to ask questions on two areas that I couldn't ask in my pack. The first question is about the new spending that's been earmarked for climate change. I think, can you tell me, does that include the money that's being brought in from the green bonds and how those kind of two sort of different funds work together? And should I ask my second question as well? So my second question is about upstream, where we saw new spending of 0.3 million in the budget there. Now, it's generating has generated 13,200 jobs and £6 billion for investment. And I know that in the MTFS, you were talking about business rates and revenue. I wondered if there had been an analysis on the return on investment of that 0.3 million and sort of roughly what the council will expect to get back over the medium term and over the long term. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Two really important questions. So firstly on climate change and then the relationship between this additional funding and the money that we're raising from the Hammersmith and Fulham green investment. I think it's important to highlight the difference between the revenue and the capital budgets. So the money from the H&F green investment goes towards capital projects. So there are a number of those that have already been started now. You'll see them out and about across the borough, whether it's urban drainage or retrofitting buildings. So that money goes directly to those capital projects. And in fact, the vast majority of the money that we spend on preventing climate change and mitigating the effects of climate change is part of the capital budget. The money here is to go towards the climate change team within the council. And it's to make sure that we're as effective as possible when it comes to applying for those grants that I mentioned and getting additional funding. This is one of these areas where you can spend a little bit of money and get a great deal back as a result of that, right? So for a number of the grants that you apply for, you need to be able to show that you're putting a small amount of money to match that. And previously, because we didn't have a pool of money set aside in the revenue budget, that was quite hard for us to do. So this really will allow us to bid for more pots of money and to generate far more revenue for spending on climate issues. In terms of the upstream funding, so this is the investment this year is new, so we haven't put this into upstream before. So I suppose that means that the £6 billion investment came from zero council spending. So that's a very good return indeed. If we get anything like that for this extra £250,000, then I'll be very pleased. But no, so this money would go towards things like incubating smaller businesses, providing affordable working space for new ventures that are setting up in the area, and really just sort of giving a kickstart to some of the innovative new businesses that we're seeing. But also making sure that the growth doesn't sort of just take place in the borough, it's part of the borough as well. We want to make sure that all the children growing up in Hammersmith and Fulham get a chance to take part in this, and that growth is very much shared out amongst everyone in the borough, not just within the site of the industrial strategy itself up in White City.
Councillor Sleuth.
Thank you very much, and thank you. You said yesterday was your favorite pack. I hear it again. So, but thank you for both. I just want to ask a question. Obviously, on this committee, we've discussed a lot about the digital inclusion strategy, and I think we've made good progress in co-producing this with the residents and with officers. So it's very good news to see that this is one of the highlights of the budget and where investment is going. I was just hoping we could hear a bit more about exactly how you will be, or how the investment will be going towards informing residents of the dangers of fraud and also tackling that.
Yeah, absolutely. So digital inclusion is more important than ever. All of the services that we use now seem to be emigrating online, whether that's your bank account, how you pay your gas bill, how you look at your council tax bill now you can do online. So it's more important than ever that residents have got both the equipment and the skills to be able to access these services online. Sorry. That's why we put together this digital inclusion strategy with the help of this committee, who I know were invaluable. And the purpose of it is to sort of make sure that we're bringing together all of the support that's already available through the third sector, but also any businesses that want to help. I know that we've had some excellent charities working in the borough, providing computing equipment to people, particularly during the pandemic. getting computers to children who were having to learn from home. It was really inspiring to see. So we know that there's a lot of good work going on out there. We want to make sure that that's being amplified and that we can make sure that the help is getting to the people who need it most. I mentioned earlier that fraud is the fastest growing crime in the country. I think the figures for this are really quite shocking when you see them. Huge increase, I think, partly because so many more people are now going online, partly because lots of the people who are now going online don't necessarily have the skills to spot fraudsters, phishing emails and people, sending links or attachments that look innocuous, but when you click on them, allow people to look into your bank account and get your personal details and allow them to go and commit fraud. We want to make sure that everyone across the borough is given the basic tools to be able to spot these and to avoid being the victim of fraud in the future.
Councillor Perez.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, thank you very much. I would like to commend Councillor Henry, the member of Finance and Reform, and all the members of the Finance team for the balanced budget. The budget maintains frontline services that residents rely on, while at the same time generates efficiencies. It's great to see initiatives such as the PSPOs and tackling violence against women and girls, also the comprehensive council tax support scheme, provision of and protection of key services like the law enforcement team, also maintaining weekly beans, establishing family hubs. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's really positive. And at the same time, as we've heard this evening from other colleagues, protecting free home care charges as well. So lots of positive areas to celebrate. I've got a couple of questions, please. So the first one is on the Household Support Fund. So how are we going to be using this money, about this fund? Are we going to carry on then using it for the cost of living response? And also, a bit of information, please, around equalities impact assessment. I think each budget proposal has been subject to an equalities impact assessment. How is this carried out? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I think when it comes to how the equality assessment is carried out, I might leave that one to the officers if that's all right. They'll know the nitty-gritty of how that's put together. I'm glad you mentioned family hubs. So this was something that, an initiative that we started last year. I'm pleased that we're able to put a bit more money into these now because they've been so successful. We want to make sure that we're really taking council services out of the town hall and into the communities so that people who need them can access them as easily as possible. So the Household Support Fund, so for Hammersmith and Fulham, our share is £1.8 million. And yes, that's going towards helping people with the cost of living crisis. So that's going towards things like our hardship grants that you may have seen over the Christmas period. So these are grants of up to £900 for people who are struggling to pay for heating or these sorts of things. So it's really being put to good use and making sure that those who need it most are getting the support that they need.
Councillor Brockbank Fowler.
Thank you.
Sorry, we haven't quite covered the equality impact point. Sorry.
Councillor Homan. Councillor Perez, I'll try my best to answer that question overall. So I think Councillor Ree has explained how the focus of the Household Support Fund will be on the cost of living programme and all the various schemes that we're going to be progressing with that. Obviously, with all council policies, we will do an equality impact assessment, the groups that are affected, and we'll report that as part of the proposals that we develop that and when we finalise those. Hopefully that's okay, and I'll provide you with more details separately.
Sorry about that. Councillor Brockbank Fowler.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to ask a question about the resources that you mentioned, the increase in central government grants of 7.9 million. Can you break this down for me? And does it include a grant for the increase in employers' national insurance for directly employed people of the council?
Yes, so £7.8 million in increased grants. The
9.
Sorry?
It says 9,
No, it doesn't. It
7.9.
says 7.8. This is our slice, the total of our slice from the various grants that were mentioned on the first slide. And yes, that does include compensation for the employer's NI.
And how much is that?
Mr Colsey?
If I can, thank you, Councillor Homan. Councillor Brockman found that total sum that you've just talked about there includes a number of the components that Councillor Reid mentioned earlier. So, for example, the Extended Producer Responsibility Grant, 1.8 million for that from the total resources available nationally. We've got the 2.6 million or so from the Household Support Fund. Homelessness Prevention Grant, we've got about 1.2 extra. And then there's also some of the other adjustments from the base grants, the Adult and Social Care and Children's grants. I think we've got about £1 million or so extra for that, but Andre will come in on that and explain a bit more detail on those bits. But it's a combination of all those grant regimes.
Sorry, Andre Mark, Head of Finance. So just to do a bit of point of correction for Councillor Rees, so we only just got the announcement on the employers' national insurance contributions as of this week. So it's roughly about £2.2 million or so for the council that is expected for us. And that'll be in addition to these amounts that are set out in the slides presented.
Right. And how much of that does it cover? How much of the extra national insurance does that cover?
So we haven't been able to do the calculations as of yet, only because the announcements only become available this week. So as officers, we're working through the detail to understand how that will impact both the general fund and the HRA.
Okay, thank you, Andre. That's very helpful. You must have a vague idea, knowing that this has been coming since the budget at the end of October. There must be a kind of ballpark figure in your mind that you've been praying for on a daily basis.
So the working assumption is that it will cover our costs in full, but we still need to work through the detail to understand the entirety of the impact, given the recent change in allocations. So additional funding has been given to us to include both the housing revenue account and the general fund as well. So once we have a clearer idea as to the total sum and can reconcile that, then we can confirm for sure.
And going back to Councillor Ree as a more political question, presumably those, well, I'm assuming, give you the benefit of the doubt, I'm assuming that contracted out, how is this going to affect the contracted out services?
So there's built into the budget, there are increases for contracted out services already. So that's part of our plans before we talk about the increased investment.
No, sorry, not something of this size and magnitude when, for example, the waste collection and so on and so forth was negotiated years ago, not expecting to have this kind of additional increase as well as inflationary pressures.
I don't know about you, Councillor Brocklebank-Fowler. I believe in capitalism. I think it's not for the council to make profits for private companies. You know, we negotiate the best possible deal for the services that we get, and it's up to companies to provide those services that we've negotiated. And we expect all our suppliers to honour those contracts.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens.
Can I raise a point that somebody just mentioned as one of the grants, actually, and that's the Extended Producer Responsibility for Packaging. It may well have been covered in the relevant pack in more detail, and it's obviously a good thing to do, but it does look like there's potential risks for the council in that if we don't actually come up to scratch in terms of our ability to recycle more, is the way I'm reading it. I'm just wondering if somebody could break that down a little bit for me and say what the potential impact might be, both positively and negatively.
Councillor Homan, if I may, to try to explain that. So that's a really welcome programme nationally for local authorities, because for a good while, local authorities have been indicating that there are extra costs that are being incurred by us to dispose of the extra packaging. So it's a new grant, and there are some formula arrangements in there. It's going to be based on the volume that's generated. That'll be monitored over the coming year, and we will work with the government to make sure that that's fairly balanced and we get the right amount of grant that is entitled to us. There are risks with all those things, I can't deny that, but we will try to minimise those wherever we can. And the council has got the 1.8 million from that. We will try to make sure that that's maintained and secured for the future.
Thank you. I was just, it is a good thing, but it does look like there may be some risks attached, which is why I wanted to highlight it. Has anybody else got any questions on the presentation of the sort of corporate overview that we've looked at so far? Nope. Okay, maybe we can have a bit more information about national insurance once we get the detail. That would be useful. Thank you.
Chair, if I may, I can make a comment on that one. We weren't trying to be not answering the question there because the complexity of how the bandings are going to work, the actual tapers have come down as well, and then there's all the complications about your levels of earnings. So I think there or thereabouts, we will be expected that to be fully funding our funds. It might be a bit here and there out, but broadly, we think that will be the right amount overall, Councillor Brockbank-Fowler. But we will report that if there are any problems during the year.
Great, thank you very much. So we'll now move to sort of a bit more nitty-gritty in relation to the corporate services budget. And I believe Alex Pilgrim, you're going to give us a presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Alex Pilgrim, I'm Head of Finance for Finance and Corporate Services. Just wait for the slides to come up. So I'm going to be giving you an overview of the Finance and Corporate Services Department. So it looks after a wide range of both customer-facing and back-office services. That's all essential to the smooth running of the council as a whole and all of the services we provide. So this is a new department that was created in May 2024, and it brought together the previous Finance Department and Corporate Services Department together under one director and management team. It's a department with a track record of managing its budget well, and we've kept within budget in 23-24, and we're forecast to do so in 24-25 as well. So if we can go on to the, oh, it's not coming up, James. Cool, so I'm going to take you through. So we just go back one. So I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of the services that are included in Finance and Corporate, a bit about our vision and strategy. Then I'm going to take you into the numbers, the budgets for 25-26, and then some risks and opportunities. Move on to the next one. Okay, so this is designed to give you a bit of a flavour for those services and what the £53 million expenditure budget covers, and those 500 odd posts we've got there, what they are delivering for the council and our residents. So if I start with our finance team, so one of our primary responsibilities is establishing a clear medium-term financial strategy and ensuring the council's resources are well managed. We complete our statutory obligations and our year-end accounts, and ensure the council's financial resilience. A recent success for us has obviously been the approval of our council's 23-24 accounts in November, where we had an unqualified opinion. And following all those sort of nationwide audit delays, we've had 4 sets of accounts signed off in the last 18 months, which has been a great achievement and puts us in that small proportion of councils to have done so. We've also got the procurement team. They provide support across the council, ensuring we comply with procurement rules, regulations, and ensuring economic and social value through the council's commissioning activities. The members of this team also lead on our digital advertising income. So we've got some sites in the borough that generate 2.6 million of general fund income for us, and that goes straight into our frontline services for residents. We've got the business intelligence team. They've been instrumental in increasing our use of data and analytics. They work closely with all of our services, especially children's or people services. They target resources, improve strategy and decision making. Some of their initiatives like the Fraud Hub and the Automation Hub are going to be key drivers for our savings and efficiencies over the next few years. We're also home to the Policy and Programme Management Office. They ensure we closely monitor the delivery of our major projects. They've also been leading on our cost of living response that we've heard from. They've been doing it over the last few years, and they'll be continuing to make sure we use our household support fund grant as effectively as possible to support our most vulnerable residents. We've got our audit, fraud, risk and insurance teams here. And I'm just picking out the fraud one there. They've been essential for protecting our public finances, preventing and detecting fraud. We've got here 1,760 investigations that were concluded in 23-24. So see how important they are. On to the next slide, James. So Finance and Corporate is also the home for our elections team. There was two major elections last year with the mayor and the general election, and that meant 235,471 ballot papers were filled in by residents and counted at Olympia this year. We've got a resident services department, so they look after our contact centre, so over 180,000 calls answered and 13,000 in-person inquiries at King Street. They're also responsible for collecting our council tax and business rates income, following our ethical debt policy and administering one of the most comprehensive council tax support schemes that you've heard about today. We've got the benefits team, also in resident services, and they've overseen one of our great successes for the department this year, utilising the latest technology and improving their end-to-end processes. They've reformed the benefits service, moving their performance into the top quartile nationally. We've got our communications team. They keep our residents informed about our services, maintain our website, which had over 2 million visits this year. They also look after community engagement and co-production functions. We've got the expertise of our legal team. They support the council, ensuring our actions are lawful in the public interest. Almost 40,000 hours of legal work completed in 23-24. Digital services, they provide the necessary digital hardware, systems and support to all areas of the council, lead on digital change projects and keeping our data safe. And then we've got our people and talent function as well, supporting our entire workforce with HR matters, recruitment, training, development, and supporting our apprenticeship and graduate schemes. Finally, on this side, we've got our Democratic Registrars and Coroners Directorate. See the registration of births, deaths and marriage numbers on there, and civil partnerships and citizenships. It's obviously another key essential statutory service for our residents. Okay, next slide. Okay, we've seen finance and corporate services play a key role in supporting departments across the council to deliver their services. And we're also working towards our 6 values and the corporate plan that we've got set up. So some of the things we'll focus on are exceptional frontline services, effective and efficient governance, ensuring we discharge our statutory duties, and also delivering the transformation programmes that Councillor Rees spoke about earlier, the property, digitalisation, our resident experience and access programme, commercialisation, and obviously our workforce. And finally, obviously we're focused on a workforce that is motivated to deliver exceptional customer services. Next slide. So on to the budget. So after deducting income from the 53 million I spoke about in the first slide, 53 million expenditure budget, deduct your income and you get to our 37 million controllable budget for finance and corporate services. And this slide here shows the key changes from 24-25 that get us to that point. So we've got savings in the department of 510k and growth of 124, which I'll come on to in a minute. Both those will be applied to our budget alongside the contractual inflation of 410. Also got the 24-25 pay award shown on there, and that was approved late in the day, and around December time it was approved and paid out to our employees. So that's shown as a change on here, and we'll obviously replicate that in our 25-26 budget. And when it comes to the 25-26 pay award, we've set aside a budget centrally, and once that's agreed, we'll distribute that to departments during the year. So the next slide. So this one shows you how that budget is allocated across the different services that I spoke about at the start. You can see digital services and residents are the biggest ones there, taking up over half the budget and about 46% of our staff in there. Okay, on to the next one. So this slide gives you a little bit more information about those budget changes. The ones that are relevant to the Policy and Oversight Board are savings of 1.3 million, So we've got 510 that are coming from finance and corporate services. Those include 150k from our local support payments. We're going to be bringing that service back in-house and aiming to reduce our administration costs. We think we're going to be able to bring in an additional 100k of income from our existing digital advertising hoardings. That's thanks to the contractual arrangements we've got for inflation with our operators. In registrars, we've been overachieving on our income target in 24-25, and following reviews of the fees and charges, we think we're going to budget for this additional income. It's another 80k. We've got 2 posts in our community engagement team that have been vacant since they were established, so deleting those is going to allow us to make a budget saving of 80,000. And finally, a reduction in our mobile phone costs will give us a saving of about 80,000. And then on there, we've got the 750k, which is in our budget. So council-wide, for our council-wide corporate redesign. And once that's been worked on a little bit more, those savings will be allocated across departments once those plans are finalised. In terms of the investment, we've already spoken tonight about the 124k for the digital inclusion strategy, and we've heard how the added benefit of that is going to be reducing the vulnerabilities to cybersecurity for our residents and enhancing our corporate anti-fraud. We also need to add 425k to our insurance premiums budget. That's held separately from finance and corporate within our centrally managed budgets. And finally, on there, we've got a bit about the inflation. So 410k of inflation. Primarily, that's going to go towards our digital services function for funding those contractual inflation that we expect to see. Also, a little bit will go into our HR, finance and HR system costs. And we'll also put a bit more into our third sector investment fund budgets to make sure those keep pace with inflation. Last slide. So finally, on our future plans and opportunities and risks, we'll be progressing that corporate redesign that's in the savings plans. This will help us organise the council in the best way to deliver services and rise to some of the challenge of service-wide pressures. So we're already planning ahead for 26, 27 and beyond so that we continue the strong financial governance and be able to set that balanced budget that we've managed to do this year. Key to doing that is going to be the maximising the use of data, technology, performance management to support those frontline services. And we'll be continuing the work on digitalisation and resident experience and access programme that aims to modernise our service delivery whilst ensuring that strong cybersecurity we talked about. It's also essential that we maximise the financial performance of our business rates and council tax collections. That's a key focus for us, making sure that we bring in the revenue that funds our services. Finally, I'll just leave you with some of the risks that we're obviously considering and monitoring as we move into the new financial year. As with all councils, we're experiencing an incredibly challenging financial outlook. We've got uncertainty over government funding and particularly from funding reform and working out how that's going to affect Hammersmith and Fulham. We've got pressure on public finances will also continue through the national economic factors, inflation, interest rates, employment, and those service-specific pressures that we've got for homelessness, adults and children's. Cybersecurity obviously continues to be a threat, even with the continued investment we're making in this area. We also had a successful local government association peer review of our approaches, but it continues to be a risk we must rise to the challenge of. So that's it. Thank you for listening, and any questions?
Councillor Brocklebank-Farrier.
Thank you, Chairman. Could you explain to me, please, what does £750,000 savings from corporate redesign mean?
Councillor Holman, if you want me to progress that. Before I answer that question, I just want to say a couple of comments really about the presentation here. I personally feel very privileged to be working at the council here, and I'm delighted to be heading the department that's been described to you as Finance and Corporate Resources. We've got some great officers, excellent talent, all experienced. And do you know what I always see with them? The desire that they want to provide the best services for the residents here and be as efficient as we can in how we do things. And you've got a flavour there about the range of services that we provide, from frontline services, registrars, giving people their benefits, sorting out the council tax issues, to what you might describe as more mundane jobs, making sure that the statutory accounts are sorted out and done. But they're very important because they provide reassurance to you as members, to the members of the public, to government, to businesses, that you're a very well-run organisation overall. Councillor Holman, I hope you don't mind me saying a few words about that, because I genuinely feel that's the position here. So long may that continue, and we provide the best services that we can to the residents, and we manage our resources well. We're going to minimise the cost. So let me come to the point that Councillor Brocklebank-Fowler has raised there. We are always trying to make sure that we minimise the total number of staffing that we need to deliver the services. So we set a very ambitious target last year's budget that we're going to deliver £1 million worth of savings from the chief officers across the council overall. We've achieved some of that already, because members, you'll know that previously there were 6 senior executive directors of the council. We're down now to 3 directorates. So we've done part of that, but we're progressing that through the next stages to always make sure that we're very efficient, very focused in the way we will provide services, provide resilience, servicing group together that work in the most efficient way. So that programme will continue during the current year, and we will be able to deliver those savings overall. There will be some reductions in the total number of staff there, but they'll be achieved through natural turnover, people leaving and perhaps getting jobs elsewhere, and so on. So we will avoid those matters, and we'll progress that during the year.
So how much of that figure will include, would be put down to payoffs?
I'm unable to give you that number there because those matters have not been determined, but they will be reported in due course if that needs to be done.
And just by my sort of other point, under legal services, I notice there's a deficit somewhere. Does that include the external legal services that we pay for, or is that just an internal figure?
I mean, I'll say a couple of words, Councillor Brocklebank-Fowler, and I'll invite Alex to comment on the details. So our legal services, the total spend is effectively recharged out to all the directorates. So that's why you see that credit budget there. It's not making a loss. It's just that all their costs get recharged out to the services overall. It does include all the external advisory services that the council needs to get occasionally. You'll accept that we don't have all the internal expertise that we need. The law in this country is enormously complicated, and sometimes we have to resort to getting the best advice that we can to protect the council's position. So those costs are in there as well. Alex, I don't know whether you want to say anything about the split of those costs.
Yeah, so we've got 2.9 million expenditure budget there. That's our in-house legal team. The external budgets are held across the different services. And the credit you can see there, that's us recharging our internal team across the council as they use the legal services. And it's a net credit because we also bring in some planning income that's actual additional income to the council. So they're actually running on a credit budget, if you like. They're bringing in surplus, a net surplus. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, Councillor Vaughan?
I mean, thanks very much again for preparing this budget, similar to the overall budget, clearly, of which it's a part. I'm sure a lot of hard work's gone into this. Interested if you could say more on the cybersecurity issue. Clearly, I'm glad to hear that more's being spent in that area. One of the things that I think comes up on the BBC London News regularly is the problems that have happened across the public sector, including at Hackney Council, I believe, where they had a cyber attack some time ago, and it is still taking them a long time to recover from that. In terms of what the expenditure will be against sort of cyber attacks and the like, is this presumably increasing the council's resilience against cyber attacks? And also, in terms of your suggesting that residents would benefit from that, is that they can hopefully have more confidence in interacting digitally with the council so that there won't be sort of blowback on them from their sort of digital interactions with the council? Is that the sort of flavour of what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, so just to tackle the broad point, you're absolutely right that we're seeing a huge number of cyber attacks on the public sector at the moment. There's the British Library recently spent a fortune trying to recover from a cyber attack. You mentioned the North London Council that was a victim of a cyber attack, and Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Trust also recently was a victim. So it's something that we're very keen, we're very alive to the threat of this. You know, the council there are 20,000 attempted cyber attacks on the council every day. That shows the scale of the challenge that we're facing. Now, it's really important that we do put in place proper systems to stop these, and making sure that we invest in the most up-to-date technology and training as well, to make sure that that staff are alert to what's happening. But you know, it's something we have to remain vigilant to, and it's something we will remain vigilant to going forward.
Thanks. So I wonder if you could say, well, we can discuss this later, more about the training. I'm assuming that there's sort of training and reporting for council staff in terms of cyber. So, for example, are phishing and other attacks, is there a way of reporting those? Yeah, absolutely. And not just council staff. I think maybe over the course of the last year, some of you might have got some slightly odd emails, and we're constantly testing all the potential pinch points within the system. So councillors and council staff have been provided with training on this. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Phishing is the main threat, I think, when it comes to the sort of attacks that we get. We have to make sure that everybody who's in a role where you're susceptible to get these sort of emails has got the proper understanding, so that they can combat cyber attacks like this.
Okay, any other questions for the moment? I'm going to make a comment and add a question onto that, actually. So many of the sort of transformation of services that we've talked about digital inclusion, we've talked about AI, we've talked about the REAP programme, all things that are transforming the way that we deliver services. This committee has had a look at all of those areas, and we will continue to investigate those and make sure that they're on track and that they are actually fit for purpose, which we've kind of been doing over the last year or two. So I can see the benefits of that. But I just want to pick up, there is one item which is a very small cut where we've got community engagement officers, and I can see that we're saying that these are vacant posts, and I think I read in the papers that they've been vacant posts since COVID. The point I think I want to make on that is, if we're actually doing co-production and if we're designing services with residents, is community engagement not one of the areas where we ought to possibly be looking at whether it is, yes, they might have been vacant, but is there useful purpose in the posts that we've never filled? So I want to ask a question about that, given that we're trying to transform services, but in partnership with our residents. We don't want to do it isolated.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. I'd point out that with things like the digital inclusion strategy, that comes with specific funding for community engagement. So where we do need to carry out that engagement, that'll be funded as part of the programmes themselves, rather than having generic community engagement staff who may or may not be involved with that co-production work.
Councillor Vaughan?
So, I mean, just on that point, Chair, I should note at the pack that we had only on Monday night, we had an excellent presentation just after the budget presentation on the disabled residents team that's working with the Environment Department on co-production, and there's an enormous amount of work going on there with residents, and I'm sure that's true across a number of service areas. So whilst these posts look like they might be being deleted, that clearly doesn't mean that there isn't engagement and co-production going on with residents right across the board.
And it's also, as we move to more digital ways of contacting us, obviously all of the issues about residents feeling safe when they contact us online are relevant as well, which is another thing we've obviously looked at this committee, and we will continue to do so. Are there any other questions? Councillor Selous.
Thank you very much, and again, thank you for the presentation. You mentioned, Alex, local support payments, and you made a comment about how we're bringing this in-house. So I was just hoping you could tell us a bit more, or Councillor Reid, either or, yeah, if you could give us more detail.
Yeah, thank you very much. So local support payments are a really important part of the support that we provide for vulnerable residents across the borough. It's something we've done for a number of years now, essentially where people have emergencies, unexpected, additional need for support. They can get in touch with the council and we provide them with support that they need. The reason we're making this change is because we want to make sure that as much of that money goes towards people who need it as possible. At the moment, the scheme is administered by RBKC, and for every £3 that we give out, it costs £1 to administer. That doesn't feel particularly efficient to me. We think we can do a better job of that. That's why we're bringing it in-house. So we'll be protecting the money that's actually provided to people who need it. But we just don't think that it should cost that much to run. I think we'd struggle to spend that much of the budget on administration.
Oh, okay, thank you. So presumably it's legacy of tri-borough, bi-borough. Yeah, okay.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the detailed corporate budget? I think the fact that we've looked at some of these issues sort of over the course of the year and we've looked at some of the funding related to it, it's probably why we don't have too many questions. Okay, could I thank the officers for what is in the context of how the world is at the moment and other councils are in. We seem to have a very good budget in front of us, and I know it's not easy to put this together every year and to look at it and to constantly look at how we can improve services with less money. We seem to be doing a good job, and long may we continue, and long may the reports come to this committee which shows how you're doing it through the year. So I'd like to thank you very much. I think there's a couple of points that we probably need a little bit of feedback on after the meeting or at the next meeting, which we'll pick up on. But thank you very much for coming this evening, and we look forward to seeing a really good budget over the coming year, and that all your predictions are going to be accurate, which I'm sure they are. So thank you very much. So just leads me on to the end of the meeting, actually, which I believe all of the PACs have looked at their budget, so we don't have any particular PAC reports to consider tonight. And the work programme, I think I mentioned last time, we are going to look at the drug strategy. That may come in May, it may come a bit later. But one of the issues that's come up a little bit this evening, which I thought would be a good item to bring, is to bring back a report from People and Talent. So we've talked about quite a lot of HR issues this evening. I know that there's been a little bit of discussion around safety for some of our frontline staff. So I thought that might be a very good item to have a look at the next meeting, along with potentially the drug strategy. So I'm going to ask if anybody's got any other suggestions. We're obviously going to be keeping tabs of what is going on in terms of our various transformation programmes and our transformation of digital, etc., and REAP. But those sort of strategic programmes will come back. Co-production will come back. But if there's any other new issues that people feel that they would like to bring to me, then either say now or have a word with me after the meeting. So quiet, silence. Okay, great. Thank you very much, everybody. So that just asks me if you could note the two items that I have just mentioned, and please note the dates of the future meetings. The next one is not until the 6th of May, so quite a long time. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for coming.